A very good morning or good afternoon to you all, depending where you are around the world. Today, thank you for joining our series of webinars on C-side development, the one-on-one series for anybody who wants to get into C-side development. And yes, today we have a special guest, David Studebaker, let's say senior to us all, and having been in programming world for a decade or 5, 6, at least. He was there already when I was born, and he joined in the NAV world a decade or 2, 3 ago. And yes, being the writer of a very useful book, we asked him, could you give kickoff to this webinar series of sessions. Before we will go into that, a number of housekeeping rules. This will be recorded, so you can find the recording on Mark's YouTube channel with any other recording we did so far with the webinar. So feel free to use it and share it with colleagues, with friends, or whatever. Any new webinars, I will have a second slide or next slide showing some dates of next one, but you can always find it on our website. If you have questions, please use the question window on the GoToWebinar. We'll pick them up. Today's webinar is partly a recorded one in the sense that Dave is sitting somewhere in the outskirts of America, having not always a stable internet connection, so we decided to have a pre-recording of his presentation. But Dave is also online, so if you have questions, he will be part of the ones with me and maybe others to answer them. For February, we have 2 webinars in stock. Second webinar on this series, which I will lead on the 27th. And there's another one from John Long from Archimport, who will talk about a huge upgrade project. However, the date, we have not, let's say, get agreement on that yet, but we will communicate it as soon as possible in our newsletter and Twitter or Facebook, so be in sync with us. Somewhat further ahead, the series will be a monthly play of one topic, so in March, at the end of March, we will have the 3rd one, and more or less almost every 4 weeks, well, actually precisely every 4 weeks, we will have the next topic. So up till summer, we will have with this and the next one together 7 sessions, and after summer season, we will have remaining 5 of the remaining topics of the book. Yes, and maybe you could be a presenter, and if you want to, send me an email. Be free to do that, and let's see what we can get done. Of course, as said, this series is based on the book. David already wrote, well, the first version, I think it was already 10 years ago on 5.0 or 2009, and ever since with every version, this has been updated. If you want to have a copy of it, send me a mail. We're trying to get, and we unfortunately haven't succeeded to get some kind of discount agreement with Pact, with the publisher, but we're still, let's say, fighting for it. So if you want to have a copy of it, contact us, send me a mail, as you can see this email address. So for today, we'll have this webinar in 3 sections. As I said, we pre-recorded it because of unstable internet connection on Dave's side, but well, I guess we get this played very well. You will find it later on YouTube. We'll have to bring the recordings together because apparently GoToWebinar doesn't record what we will be playing, but we will put it together. And of course, before I start explicitly, thank you to Liberty Grove for being our host again on this webinar, and Joe Mattis specifically, who is doing the recording and helping out on technical matters. So let's get started. Our first section is an introduction, and as I said, Dave has So before we move into the developer side, if you have questions, feel free to post them. type them into the question area. I didn't see one yet so far, so might mean that there are no questions at the moment. We'll move into the next session, being going into the development part, as Dave said, where you've been waiting for probably. So, no questions. Let's move into we have another question and answer section later on also, so feel free to type them into. But let's move on to the second session. So let me get things in place here. So this concludes the second session, and just before we go into hands-on, I've got a question from Paul Simpson. Dave, maybe you want to pick it up. He's actually asking, you're mentioning it's not a good practice, or it's good practice not to program on pages, putting code on pages. Paul is asking more or less, in short, where do we put code on pages? Can be very short. We will be addressing this issue, of course, in the next seminar series. But David, do you have a quick answer to this one?
Yes, Paul. The best practice is that any code that customizes the display of data really should be tied to the tables, so that whatever function handles that data can take advantage of that code. If you put it in the pages, then you may be faced with having to put it in every page that displays that code. So the control of that should be in the tables and or called from the tables, but the table should be the resident of that code.
Yeah, you could even add to it, as Paul in a second reply on his own question says, yeah, there is practice that you even put most of your code in code units and just call it from anywhere you want to use it. Just one thing which came to my mind, David, you mentioned there was a difference between local and global functions. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Well, a local function can only be called from within the object where it's resident, and a global function can be called from any object. If everything you do is global, and because a lot of what is in NAV is legacy, a lot of the original NAV functions were defined as global as the default. But as new things are built and as we build things, everything that only applies to the object within which we're working should be identified as global. It saves confusion both on a development and a debugging basis.
Okay, thank you very much, David. So let's move to the last section. We will go a little bit beyond the hour. But let's jump into it, and feel free to post your questions while it's running already. Sometimes I will answer them meanwhile already, but we'll have some time at the end with David. So thank you very much, Dave. We'll move into the last part of the Q&A. We have gotten quite some questions already in the question pane, and I've answered a couple of them already. We will continue with this, as said, with next and dive into deeper parts. So Dave gave a broad overview of everything. Dave, anything to add to it for today?
I do not. I'd like to thank everybody for attending.
Yes, thank you very much, everybody. And well, if you want to, for some, there was some technical issues. So if you want to let's say, view it again, you will find it on YouTube in due date. We will also communicate on that on Twitter, in our news, etc.
There's two other questions out there. One is, when is the next webinar? If you could go back a slide to show that. And then another person asks about the book on the development environment. And there's a couple books out there. They're on Pact Publishing. And at the beginning, he talked about it. But it looks like...
This is the next date. So the second, I will pick up on tables, let's say the fundamental components, on the 27th. and this will be the schedule for the rest. Every 4 weeks, we will have the next webinars.
He asks about books on the new environment. Are you talking about VS Code, Kurt?
There is already talks on getting, let's say, this book updated on VS Code, but that will be quite an investment to do. So we really would like to have it yesterday, but probably will take some time. But yes,
I'm pretty sure somebody I know is working on that right now, actually. So it's in the works.
Yeah. So thank you, Joe, for having us online. Thank you, David, for your whole story. Thank you very much. Thank you for everybody to have been here, and hope to see you next time. Have a nice evening, a nice day.
Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.